But recently, just recently, you speared up there at Palos Verdes a giant white sea bass. Why don't you tell us about that? That fish was over 70 pounds, wasn't it?
76 pounds.
Oh my God!
It's literally right time in the right place. Just.
Did you go targeting white sea? Were you thinking?
Oh yeah,
I want to get a sea bass. Okay.
Absolutely. It was in the first part of May 2nd actually.
Typically,
the bigger ones come in earlier in the year, and around like March is typically you get less fish, but you get bigger fish.
Yeah.
Spearfishing, and I went in the morning and it was drizzling. I almost didn't go. All the little things. I went by myself, which my wife hates. But sometimes you can't find people to go. I'm retired, so. And this was actually I think 2 or 3 years ago now. But I ran up to Furman. I was going to jump in there, and I kind of looked at conditions. It just didn't look good, didn't feel right. So I'm going to go a little further up, a little further west, and. So I ran a little bit further west, and I stopped at a spot, and I looked, and the conditions look pretty good. So I dropped the hook and suited up and got in, swam into the bed.
And obviously, because of the lateral lines and how sensitive white sea bass are, you're not using tanks. You're free diving.
Oh, free diving. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to let you continue with that, but you take a gulp of air, and then you go under, and you spear a giant fish, and you get tied up in a monstrous battle. That is a dangerous game you're playing.
It can be, but it's like anything else, you learn to kind of deal with those types of scenarios.
Right.
I mean, weird things happen, that's for sure, but, typically it's, my mentor, Skip Helen, the thing he taught me and, you learn, and it takes time to learn this is, you got to be calm and you got to be quiet. So you got to get your heart rate down because the fish, they feel your presence. When you go in the water, you try and go in the water really, really quiet, and because you don't want to create big wakes, because especially with the sea bass, right, very, very sensitive.
Right.
And a lot of times you're hunting in, really poor visibility in the middle of the kelp, and in the poor visibility, sometimes you'll drop in and you won't see them, and you'll just hear them boom, 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 and their tails just booming off, and you'll
yeah.
And
do you hear the croaking sometimes?
Oh yeah, and yeah, when they're mating, you hear the croaking. Yeah, for sure. But anyways, getting back to that fish.
Yeah.
So got into the bed, swam into the bed. There was no one there, and started swimming into the current, and I saw a tail of a sea bass go by from the surface, just in visibility, which I'm guessing it was probably about 12 to 15 feet.
Right.
Which is like pretty good sometimes for sea bass. So I dropped in and I tried to find it. I couldn't find it. But I knew there was fish in the bed. And so I was the only one there. So it's like, okay, just relax, keep kicking. So I'm kicking. And then.
You say keep kicking because is the idea to cover ground?
Yeah.
Keep moving. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of quietly kicking on the surface, and I looked to my right, and I saw a couple fish going by, not too far into the surface. And so I dropped and turned towards the fish, and they kind of were dropping. So they're dropping, and I'm behind them, and they're going away, and I'm trying to catch up with them. But anyway, so I'm gliding down, they're going away, and I just remember thinking, that's a big tail. That's a pretty big fish, and I pulled the trigger, and the fish took off, and I used a reel, and there's different methods. Some people use a float line, some people use a reel. I like to use a reel. And before I could get to the surface, and I was maybe like 20 feet.
Yeah,
it took all the line off my reel.
Oh shoot!
Gone. It just went. It was like fast.
Yeah. And so what now? You're getting towed? Or you're in a struggle?
A little bit, yeah. And I was just below the surface, so I let go of the gun and grabbed the bands, and then so I got up a little bit farther, and then it stopped. So I figured it tied up, because typically they'll run,
get the kelp,
tie up in the kelp, and then we follow the line, and that whole thing. But, And so it stopped, came to the surface. Of course, your heart rate's up, and
Excited, adrenaline starting to pump.
crazy. So it wasn't taking any more, it wasn't pulling anymore. So I figured it tied up. So I started following my line, and I followed my reel line out of the kelp, and so it swam out into open water, and my line was going just under the surface, all along the outside edge of the kelp, and then it went back in. So I followed it back in.
Wow.
And got to the fish, and it was in probably about 15 feet of water, and it was just kind of just tied up and just swimming. And I dropped down and grabbed it.
So what do? You
brain it.
You
get your knife.
Mm-hmm.
You take your knife, and then you want to brain it. So it's not like it was deep to retrieve or anything.
Right.
So just grabbed it by the gills, brained it, and then brought it to the surface. And then, so the one thing that spear fishermen I think do, and I'm not dissing fishermen, I'm a fisherman.
Yeah.
Is we really take really good care of our fish. We typically get a lot less fish, because it's not always easy to get a lot of fish, but we take really good care of our fish. So what we would typically do is brain it, cut the gills, let it bleed as we get all our gear together, swim it back to the boat, and then when we get to the boat, we have a line hanging over that we'll clip the fish off, we'll gut it, and then get in the boat and pack it in ice. So it's bled, it's gutted.
Perfect.
It's
condition,
a really
right?
great product.
You're starting to sound like Captain Dave Dodge now, because he takes really good care of his
He
fish.
does. I know.
Yeah.
But I didn't do this on this one because I knew it was such a big fish. So I just swam it back to the boat, put it in the boat. I called Christine. I'm like, I got a big fish. I'm not going to believe this, So
Is that your biggest sea bass?
Oh, yeah. That's
right?
Exceptionally big.
That was
That's
enormous.
a once in a lifetime.
Oh,
fish.
for sure. Absolutely. What was your biggest fish previous to that?
52 pounds.
Well, that's a nice one, too. But
Yeah.
76, did you say?
76.
My God, that's a giant.
Yeah, just luck.
Did you have a guess as to the size of it when you were towing it back to the surface?
Well, I waited in the boat,
Mm-hmm.
but the boat's kind of rocking, so I put my scale line over the radar arch, and I picked it up, and the scale was 70, 80, 70, 80.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, oh crap! So I just put it on ice. I'm like, I'm out of here, and changed my clothes and took off for home.
Man, that's